And welcome, everybody, to the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the Vida television network. Honored beyond all comprehension you've chosen to spend some time with us tonight. Wanted to give you guys a heads up on a bit of a change that's coming up in case you haven't tuned in. Starting on January 8th, after the Christmas holiday, when we come back, we'll be doing more of an interactive type of show because we will be basically taking our content from the radio and giving you the opportunity to weigh in. So I'll give you all the information, but suffice it to say, AM 700 KSEV in Houston, Texas. That is where you will be able to call and have your voices be heard. You'll be able to call in the mornings, and by the time you visit with us tonight, you'll be able to hear your comments on the air. So it's going to be kind of a novelty thing here. You will be able to tell folks, hey, I was on the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide, and here's what I said, and especially all you folks who are progressives out there who lean more to the left. You think that you can have a debate, a cordial debate with me? I welcome you to it. Let's talk about the issues, and you guys will be able to hear yourselves right here on the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide. We'll see how that goes, but we're looking forward to it. And this show is going to be expanding to a full hour on the Vida television network. So be on the lookout for that in the coming weeks ahead. ChrisSalcedo.com if you want to weigh in right now with a voicemail or an email, or on Twitter at Chris Salcedo TX at ChrisSalcedotx. John Roberts, Fox News on the North Lawn. This was last week. He was talking with Shepard Smith just as North Korea launched its latest missile. We touched on this, and I wanted to get more in depth. Have a listen to what Mr. Roberts had to say.
By the way, Shep, I just did a little rough calculation on that North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile. There was one that was fired back in May of this year, Hwasong 12, that went 1,320 miles through the atmosphere and into the lower parts of outer space. Well, this one went 2,800 miles. That Hwasong 12 could have reached parts of the continental United States. So this new missile going more than twice that far, Shep, that puts it right into the center of the heartland.
Yeah, he was commenting to Shep Smith back there in New York. And the revision of the miles traveled by that missile puts North Korea in range of many cities, the majority of cities around the world. And that means a guy that John McCain called the crazy fat kid is now in possession of a missile that is capable of striking many targets, including almost exclusively every city in the United States. And they have a nuclear capability. This is as a result of 3 administrations sitting on their hands or their rear ends or with their thumbs up their noses or other places and doing nothing about this. As a matter of fact, certain administrations actually paid the North Koreans to develop their nuclear weapons. This is the Clinton administration, of course. And while the North Koreans were developing this missile technology that we're all seeing right now, the Obama administration sat by and did nothing. That is Mr. Rogan from the Washington Examiner. He was on Fox News. He commented about these revelations that now North Korea is in range of nearly every city in the United States.
I think what you do see in specific terms here is the North Koreans showing a capability that far exceeds anything we've seen up until this point. And I think there will be some shock in the White House and the Pentagon and in the intelligence community about just what has happened here. I think.
Do you guys actually think the intelligence community doesn't know this? If they don't, then there are some more serious problems than you and I could even imagine in our intelligence communities left over from the last administration. My guess is, though, that the intelligence people do know what's going on. However, our elected leaders have taken this tack of getting their briefings and then not telling you and I about this.
For President Trump now, the critical decision is, do you exert pressure on China, specifically Chinese financial entities, or do you take military action? Because what we have seen here with this test is the failure of, or the unwillingness, I think more likely, of the Chinese government to put the kind of pressure on to Kim Jong-un's regime that would be necessary to force him to the table.
Chinese persuasion. Look, how do I put this as delicately as I know how? I don't trust communists. Many of you who have family members, or maybe even you came from communist countries, you know not to trust communists. Communists lie. Socialists lie. Their ideological cousins here in America, they lie. That's their job. So when the Chinese say, oh, no problem, President Trump, we're going to put a whole bunch of pressure on the North Koreans, it's nonsense. The North Korean economy is nearly exclusively subsidized by the Chinese government. 90% of it. If that was cut off tomorrow, the nuclear program in North Korea would also be cut off tomorrow. Mr. Rogan is absolutely correct to be skeptical of the Chinese. Either they're not up to it or they're lying. All right. That's Lindsey Graham. And Lindsey Graham was on CBS this last weekend. And he started talking about something I want you all to consider. Preemptive war. What do you think about preemptive war? I want you to consider this. The North Koreans are very close. The only thing we don't know that they have the capability to do yet is to put that miniaturized nuclear device on the tip of a missile and shoot it up into the atmosphere, and then when it arcs back down, to survive reentry. Would that nose cone be able to burn up and destroy the nuclear core? Or will it hold and allow that missile to develop, or to deliver rather, a nuclear payload? That's what we don't know. But many are speculating if they don't already have the technology, they're months away, not years, months away from developing it. And that's why I believe you're hearing rhetoric coming out of Washington like Senator Lindsey Graham is talking to Face the Nation about.
How close? You say we're getting close to military confrontation. What are we talking about here?
The intelligence community can tell you that better than I can, but I had an extensive discussion with the administration about this topic. The policy of the Trump administration is to deny North Korea the capability to hit America with a nuclear-tipped missile, not to contain it. Denial means preemptive war as a last resort.
Preemptive war. This is where we are. And this is the ethical dilemma that I find myself in, and maybe you guys think about this too. Here are your alternatives. And here is the decision-making process the President of the United States must go through. You can either allow the North Koreans to develop their capability and then rely on the sanity of Kim Jong-un, who is, let's be honest, is nuts. Or you can take out his nuclear capability and remove the threat, knowing you could unleash conventional weapons, bombarding Seoul, South Korea, and killing thousands. So what's worse? A mushroom cloud over one of our cities, an EMP detonation in our atmosphere that destroys all of our electrical infrastructure or cripples the United States economy, cripples the United States, something that some individuals who were testifying before Congress last week said that their estimation would be a complete and utter breakdown of services in the United States. Or, as I said, you let Kim Jong-un develop his nuclear weapons and then blackmail the world. It's a sticky wicket. I understand. But that's why you have members of Congress like Lindsey Graham openly talking about this.
That preemption is becoming more likely as their technology matures. Every missile test, every underground test of a nuclear weapon means the marriage is more likely. I think we're really running out of time. The Chinese are trying, but ineffectively. If there's an underground nuclear test, then you need to get ready for a very serious response by the United States.
Should the Congress be having a big open conversation about preemptive war?
Yeah, I think so. I think the president, as inherent authority as commander-in-chief, has the ability to strike North Korea to protect the American homeland. But this discussion needs to happen among ourselves.
Now, the reason why Lindsey Graham is asked about this is because if the rhetoric heats up and Kim Jong-un actually hears guys like Lindsey Graham, who is more of a hawk on national defense issues, but if he starts hearing, I mean, Katie bar the door, if a Democrat actually believes in defending America, if you get a couple of high-profile Democrats who say, you know what, I don't think it's a good idea to let Kim Jong-un fire off a nuclear missile at anybody, much less my constituents or my country, then that will send a clear message. Now, I wouldn't hold your breath. Most of the Democrat Party today worries about Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, they don't want to prevent Kim Jong-un from using a nuclear weapon. They want to prevent Donald Trump from using a nuclear weapon. It's all rhetoric. Nobody that's sane believes that Donald Trump is going to falsely deploy or nonsensically deploy a nuclear weapon. But it does show you the priorities of the Democrat Party. Playing politics always when serious people are needed in the decision-making process. Lindsey Graham had something else to say on CBS's Face the Nation.
He's got the best national security team of anybody I've seen and since I've been in Washington. The president himself early on made the right decision.
He's talking about Trump's team that he has assembled, and I have to agree. I haven't seen this level of strength, well, since the Reagan era.
Not going to allow North Korea to hit America with a nuclear weapon. We're not going to live under that threat. If I have to go to war and I don't want to stop it, I will. Everybody before President Trump screwed it up, including Republicans. Now we need to get it right, and I think he's got the right approach. He's got the right team. I hope China will help us. We're running out of time.
Who's he talking about when he says past presidents have screwed up? Well, goes without saying, Obama and Clinton. But he also means Bush. Bush took North Korea off the state sponsor of terror list as sort of a carrot and stick, if you will. Mostly the carrots at that point. To buy some goodwill with the North Koreans on the expectation they would go, oh, let's start playing nice. How did that work out, ladies and gentlemen? Not too well. The Bush administration, the Clinton administration, and the Obama administration in particular, in the face of growing threats from North Korea, looked the other way and punted. And now we have Donald Trump, a man who's never held political office before, has to deal with this. He's also dealing with this. This is Abdul Mohammed Khatallah. He was found guilty of 3 lesser charges in the planning of Benghazi. But the most serious ones, the death penalty, he was not found guilty on. Mr. Rogan commented on this as well.
Right, and I think here you see in the clearest possible sense, the repudiation, quite frankly, in my point of view, about the Obama narrative of counterterrorism, in the sense that you bring people into civilian courts and allow them to use federal criminal procedure to their own benefits.
This is where we've got to stop kowtowing to liberal Democrats. They want to open up our justice system and give these rights that we have as Americans to radicalized Islamic fundamentalist terrorists. And it's, well, as you can see, a terrorist is now going to be supported by we the taxpayers for the rest of his life. Back in a minute, Chris Salcedo Show on the Vida Television Network. Welcome back, everybody, to the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the Vida Television Network. Yesterday, it was breaking news as I was coming on to the afternoon show in Houston. Donald Trump's travel ban has been allowed by the Supreme Court of the United States to be implemented in its entirety. 6 countries that the basket of biased press is quick to point out are majority Muslim countries are affected. Among them, Iran. Okay? Now, why do you think the basket of biased press points out that they're majority Muslim countries? Because they're trying to say that Mr. Trump's motivation was anti-Muslim. Problem is there are 42 other majority Muslim countries on the planet that were not affected. This undermines the argument, but the press will never tell you that other part. They want you to think the sum total of countries with Muslims are represented in these 6 countries, which is patently absurd. so too is the argument that this is a racial ban or a bigoted ban. This has nothing to do with, or a religious ban, has nothing to do with Islam, with Arabs, or anything of the kind. This has to do with radicalized Islamic fundamentalist terrorism and making sure they don't get access to our country. Here's how the conversation went with a good buddy of the program yesterday on the radio. Have a listen. Welcome back, everybody. It's Chris Salcedo Show. I am your liberty-loving Latino. Do not confuse me with loudmouth leftist Latinos out there. I actually love my country, the United States of America. Let me bring on an old friend of the program, Curtis Ellis. He worked out of the Trump Tower on the Trump campaign as a senior policy advisor and worked in the president's transition team as well. Mr. Ellis, welcome back to the Chris Salcedo Show.
It is great to be back, Chris.
I want to get you to weigh in on some of the breaking news that's coming out right now, and actually some vindication in my mind. First, the Supreme Court has said the entire travel ban that Trump put in can go into effect, while the challenges to said travel ban wind their way through the lower courts. What do you say about this?
I say it's great. We always knew this was going to happen. President Trump always said this would happen. When the Supreme Court got to hear the case, they would institute his travel ban. And this is exactly what happened. Once again, Donald Trump is proven right. Once again, Donald Trump proves the lying fake news media wrong, all the naysayers.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court upheld in 7-2 decision the travel ban, and they upheld the argument made by the Solicitor General, which is the president has statutory authority to set immigration policy. That's what the Solicitor General argued, and that's what the Supreme Court agreed with.
You know, I was reading the Associated Press copy on this that basically said that individuals were very upset around the country who happened to be of a liberal persuasion, that somehow if somebody had a Muslim relative here in the United States, that wouldn't be an automatic paving of the way for individuals to come in from these 6 countries that have been named. And those 6 countries like Yemen and Iran. Let me just go down the list to make sure I get it correctly here. It's Chad, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. These left-wing extremists, many of them judges in the lower courts, couldn't conceive that their relatives who were mainstreamed over here in the United States and maybe have assimilated could be just fine, but their relatives over in places like Chad, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen could be radicalized, and that they would be opening the door for these radicals to gain access to America. They couldn't conceive of this.
Oh, boo-hoo. You know, the pro-immigration, open borders people always choose, like, the rocket scientist or the cancer surgeon, and they make believe all immigrants are cancer surgeons, rocket scientists, brainiacs. Yeah, that's not the case. We have seen what chain migration means. That guy, that bomber, the crazy that drove over the people in Manhattan the other day, he brought like 23 people in no time through chain migration. And what the lower court, what the crazy judge in Honolulu and in the Ninth Circuit said is, well, yeah, you know, if you have a relative or a relative of a relative, or maybe you rode a bus once with a relative, you can bring them over too. Enough already. The Supreme Court said no. And they, by the way, they upheld what Stephen Miller, the presidential aide, had said back in the day when he said the president's authority to make immigration law cannot be questioned. That's statutory. It's written right into the law. And the Supreme Court said, yes, sir, that's true.
Yeah, it's not only is it statutory, but it's also the Constitution, of the little thing called the Constitution that so many left-wing judges ignore.
Oh, that.
Yeah, that too. Let me get into this evolution, if you will, as reality sets in inside of Alabama's race about Roy Moore. The reality is that Roy Moore is either polling ahead or he is tied with his Democrat challenger. It's a razor-thin margin for tax relief. There's no way they're going to be able to get it to the president's desk, at least conventional wisdom says, by the end of the year. So when they get back from Christmas recess, it will necessitate that they actually get this thing taken care of, and they're worried about another Democrat seat taking over in the Senate. And so Mitch McConnell and the president are kind of backing off Roy Moore. They're basically saying, leave it up to the voters of Alabama, or as Donald Trump said today, Curtis, go get him, Roy Moore.
Go get him. Yeah, look, and this is related to today's story as well with the Supreme Court. Who's going to get to pick the next Supreme Court justice? Because there very well may be, very likely, there will be another vacancy on the Supreme Court. Is it going to be Chuck Schumer and his liberal coterie in the Senate that gets to pick the next justice, or will it be Donald Trump and a solid Republican majority? That's what's at stake in this election in Mississippi, along with, as you correctly pointed out, the tax cuts. Who is going to be making policy and making judicial appointments and the Supreme Court appointments the next time one comes up, which could be very, very soon, very likely in the next 4 years? And look, that's what this is about. Now, America First Policies, I'm with America First Policies, and we did a poll, and we saw the poll found, we did several polls, and we found that Roy Moore, Judge Moore, is ahead very narrowly. But the interesting thing is the negatives for Doug Jones are skyrocketing.
Yeah.
As the people of Alabama take a look at their choice, they see that Doug Jones is pro-abortion, anti-gun, open borders, weak on crime. He is against everything they're for, and he's for everything they're against. And they don't believe the allegations against Judge Moore, these 40-year-old out of the woodwork, come up out of the grave, last-minute revelations. But what they do know, and they do believe, is Doug Jones' record disqualifies him to serve as a senator from Alabama.
Curtis Ellis, my guest right now, America First Policies. It's back in D.C. and in New York City. So, Curtis, the Chris Salcedo Show has had a pretty bold line drawn in the sand about all of these sexual misconduct allegations. Allegations are one thing, admissions are quite another, and we have a couple of Democrats who have admitted to wrongdoing. And individuals, and I think the number is 268. I have a soundbite somewhere here in the stack that's going to be able to. I think it's 268 payouts. And what we have said is that if any elected leader, not specifying party, if any elected leader has paid out taxpayers' money in hush money to sexual accusers, they ought to meet the desired Roy Moore standard of Mitch McConnell, which is their names got to be known and they got to be expelled from Congress. Is that too extreme?
No. Well, let's put it this way. President Trump has said we need to know the names of the people who've paid off their accusers with taxpayer money.
Indeed.
Members of Congress who have used the taxpayers' money to settle claims of sexual harassment, we have to know who they are. That is not asking too much. Then it's up to the people, I believe, this is my personal opinion, it's up to the people of the state whether they want those folks in Congress or not. If they want to reelect them, and if it's something really egregious, then where you're getting into criminal matters, well, there are all kinds of ethics rules on the books
Sure.
For Congress to deal with.
Well, I guess look
at John Conyers, for example.
Yeah.
He used his work from the allegations, from what we know. It appears that he used his workplace to do things that you could never use your workplace to do in the private sector.
True.
I mean, that's beyond an allegation, right? That's
well, not only
beyond
that,
an allegation
if you're
touched
paying
me somewhere when I was taking a picture with him at the state fair.
Well, if you're paying shush money, that doesn't look very good. And you know what? Blake Farenthold, who's a Republican here in the state of Texas, I've said, hey, you paid $68,000 in hush money of our money and didn't tell anybody about it. And to pay off one of your accusers on sexual harassment, you're gone, buddy. You're gone.
Right.
This is the way we feel about it. That if Mitch McConnell and you know what, as soon as we started getting serious about this, and because Mitch McConnell, all these never Trumpers, and all of these establishment Republicans were coming out there saying we're going to expel Roy Moore when he gets to the United States. Well, that's fantastic. Roy Moore has allegations against him, and if allegations are enough, then certainly allegations along with a payoff is going to be even better. So we want the same standard for your swamp creatures there in the Congress. And then all of a sudden, these Republicans started backing off, saying, whoa, wait a minute, hold on, let's not go there, shall we?
Yeah, well, thanks for holding their feet to the fire, Chris. Really, you called that hypocrisy. We had Nancy Pelosi saying that John Conyers is entitled to due process, which was a stronger defense of John Conyers than any Republican ever made.
She called him
Judge Moore for these allegations that are 40 years old.
She called him an icon for crying out loud.
Ridiculous.
And then
ridiculous.
She calls him an icon on Sunday, and then by Thursday she's calling on him to resign. By the way, speaking of Conyers, ladies and gentlemen, he has a press conference scheduled for tomorrow. We'll see what he says. Curtis Ellis, everybody, he's with America First Policies PAC in D.C. and New York City. Last thing I want to get you to weigh on, because you already touched in on this, the verdict out in California. Jamil Shaw, we have been reminded here, his son, he was a black man, by the way, his son was taken by an illegal alien felon on his third gun charge. And then, of course, the attacker of Kate Steinle in San Francisco, we won't even give him a name because he doesn't even deserve a name. So he kills Kate Steinle. She dies in her father's arms. You and I, if we look down at our phone and we rear-end somebody and kill somebody, could be charged with manslaughter, Curtis Ellis. But an illegal alien is special and privileged in the state of California, and he walks. What do you think about that?
Disgusting. It's a couple of things going on here. Number one, we need the wall. We need to change our immigration laws. We need to strengthen our immigration laws and force them for a change. And I have a feeling that these people, these crazy, these kook house crazies in San Francisco, they wanted to get even with Donald Trump. Yeah. They wanted to get rid. They said, our President Trump really made a big deal out of this. We'll show him. We'll let the guy off. They've got a city where you can defecate on the street. Everything smells like urine there. You can't walk 10 feet without stepping over a homeless person who's got a needle hanging out of their arm and their cup out for money for you. That's the kind of place they live, and that's the kind of place they want to live. It's disgusting. And they're all breaking the law through this so-called sanctuary city. Newsflash, folks, there is no sanctuary for lawbreakers in the United States of America. But unfortunately, they haven't gotten that message in San Francisco.
Yeah.
It is appalling.
Well, the sad news is that there is sanctuary in the cities of San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, Austin, and that's why they're in Congress. Curtis Ellis, there is a lawmaker who wants to put Democrats, because only Democrats are violating the law in this regard, put Democrats in jail if they enable illegal aliens to escape deportation. And already in the state of Texas, we have a law passed that's winding its way through the courts right now that does just that. Curtis Ellis, everybody, he's with America First Policies PAC in D.C. and New York City. You guys have a website, Curtis, where folks can go to?
You bet. AmericaFirstPolicies.org, AmericaFirstPolicies.org. You'll find all about us. We're there to support the president and his agenda and his policies.
All right, man. Hey, we appreciate you making out time. And we got you in here lickety-split, too. The news broke and you were here. So, Curtis Ellis, we appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Nice to be with you, Chris, anytime.
And that'll do it for the Chris Salcedo Show worldwide here on the Vida Television Network. Glad you joined us tonight, folks. Look, keep in touch with the program on social media. You can go email or voicemail at chrissalcedo.com or instantaneous feedback always on Twitter at Chris Salcedo TX at CHRIS SALCEDOTX as in Texas. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow. The Chris Salcedo Show worldwide on the Vida Television Network.